The next psalm in this group of hymns in Book 4 is a psalm that focuses on God as judge, and this will be a theme going forward in many of the psalms that follow as well. And that makes sense. If God is the King everlasting, Psalm 93, the King who is on the throne, well, what is it that a king is supposed to do? Well, a king is supposed to administer justice, and particularly to defend the most vulnerable of society. This is the chief task of a king, to be the just ruler who cares for the poor and needy and punishes the wicked. And so we see plenty of that in this psalm. First, notice that the Lord is identified as the God of vengeance, a God of justice, a God who fights for us, who repays the wicked for what they have done. The prayer is that this God of vengeance would shine forth, that the light switch would be turned on, the cockroaches would run as the Son of Righteousness rises. O Judge of the earth, repay the proud what they deserve. Here's the complaint, O Lord, how long shall the wicked exult? So there's that common refrain of how long is this going to last, God? The wicked seem to have their way on this earth. God, would you flip the light switch on, show up, and repay the proud? And the proud that's the chief sin of man, isn't it? Is pride. And that goes on to be described in the following verses. They pour out arrogant words, the evildoers boast. So there's the pride. They crush your people, O Lord. They afflict your heritage. They kill the widow, the sojourner, they murder the fatherless. Remember, we said that there were this quartet of the marginalized in Scripture: the widow, the orphan, the alien, the foreigner, and the poor. So we have 3 out of those 4 that are here. And verse 7, they say, the Lord does not see, God of Jacob does not perceive. This, again, is something we've seen before in Psalm 14 and 53. The fool says, there's no God, there's no judgment. So disregard for the poor, practice of injustice, these are rooted in the idea that there is no justice. There is no God. There is no accountability. And if you accept that premise, then nothing is off the table. You can do anything you want against other human beings. You can treat them, as Psalm 14 says, as commodities. You can devour them as bread. So that's what the wicked do. They say, there's no God. God doesn't see. There is no judgment. I can do whatever I want. And so they oppress the weakest among us. And so the psalmist issues then a strong warning to them. You need to understand, be wise, you fools. God does see, God does know, and he knows, verse 11, that the thoughts of man, they are but a breath. They are futile, is the Septuagint translation of that. That's what the word is used in 1 Corinthians 3:20. The thoughts of the wise, they are futile. So even the thoughts of the wise are futile in God's eyes. Note in verse 10, God is the one who disciplines the nations, and he teaches man knowledge. That the judgments often come upon nations as well as the individual. So both are referenced here in verse 10. Verse 12 is another of the 26 mockerisms that are found in the book of Psalms, a blessing. Blessed is the man whom you discipline, O Lord, whom you teach out of your law. It's easy to see the correspondence with verse 10, that God disciplines nations, teaches man. Here he disciplines the individual, teaches us his law, and when we do so, we'll find rest from days of trouble until a pit is dug for the wicked, until vengeance comes on the wicked. For the Lord will not forsake his people. He'll not abandon his heritage. His justice will return to the righteous, and all the upright in heart will follow it. So this is a statement of trust, that we can have confidence in God's just rule, that justice will be done ultimately in the end. Verses 16 through 19 also express this confidence in a personal way. The psalmist moves to first person singular, who rises up for me against the wicked, against the evildoers. Lord, was my help when I thought my foot slips. Reminds us of Psalm 73, where the psalmist said, my foot almost slipped. Your steadfast love, O Lord, held me up. And I love the promise of verse 19. When the cares of my heart are many, your consolations cheer my soul. So there's a little first-person singular testimony here that I trust in you, God. I don't just trust in you to do justice on a global scale, but on a personal level as well. Verse 20, can wicked rulers be allied with you, those who frame injustice by statute? It's a rhetorical question. Of course, the answer is no. God is holy, and yet there are rulers, there are authorities who will frame or fashion injustice by statute. And this is true throughout human history. There have been unjust laws, and as Dr. Martin Luther King said, unjust laws are not to be obeyed because God is the author of justice. His laws are the final laws, and a law that is not consistent with the laws of God is an unjust law. So yes, wicked people can frame injustice by statute. They can band together against the life of the righteous, condemn the innocent to death. And we think here in our own modern time of the moral evil that is abortion, statutes that are fashioned for injustice without regard to innocent life. So this is not just an ancient world thing. It's very true today. Verse 22 and 23, the psalm will end with a strong statement of confidence. The Lord is my stronghold, the rock of my refuge. That's common language in the Psalms. He will bring back on them their iniquity and wipe them out for their wickedness. That God will come and bring justice. And notice how the psalm ends with 3 lines. That's unique in this psalm, as if to say this is complete, this is final. He states it 3 times. God will come and do justice. The psalm reminds us as we think of Jesus, as he talks about judgment. Jesus himself says in Matthew 25 that he will come in the clouds and he will separate the nations as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats, and he will judge them. He will judge each of us based on our active concern for the needy. Are we treating people as God treats them? Are we caring for the widow, the poor, the orphan, the foreigner? God's kingship is about the administration of justice, and as members of his church, we need to be about the same thing, the administration of justice, rescuing the needy and punishing the perpetrator. When Jesus comes and sits on his thrones, he will judge us on how we have treated the needy. That's what Psalm 94 reminds us of. We can entrust God with good judgment ultimately, and he trusts us to exercise that same kind of justice during our days on earth.